In both DC and Marvel, supervillains have gotten pretty overpowered to the point where many of them are considered to be cosmic or Omega level, among other new titles. But don't you remember when bad guys used to roam the cities at night, dwelling in alleyways and heading up street gangs? Well, I do. So let's take a look at the top 10 most powerful street level villains. At number 10 is Bullseye. Longtime villain to Daredevil, Bullseye has become one of the most powerful and unbeatable villains to be considered a street level threat. His marksmanship gives him that extra fear factor since he prides himself on never missing, so whatever he's firing at you, you'd better hope it's not deadly because it's probably making contact one way or another. Bullseye is also credited, if that's the right word, with killing Elektra in the comics, leading to her very real and lengthy absence, that is until she returns as Daredevil. He's also killed Daredevil's lifelong lover, Karen Page, and the Daredevil himself at one point during the End of Days storyline. This is also a pretty shocking moment, especially given the method by which Bullseye does it. A stab right to the head isn't the way you expect a mainstream Marvel hero to go down, and at the hands of a street level bad guy too. At number 9 we have Harley Quinn. Harley is a relatively new comic book villain all things considered, but in her short time since her first appearance in Batman the Animated Series, she has made a huge splash. Originally the evil sidekick to the Joker, she has since branched off and made a name for herself as a pretty impressive street level villain. She's very cunning, but also shows some very impressive power at times, like when she beats down Nightwing, or even the time she takes out Wonder Woman single-handedly. At least for a time, and she does it with sleeping gas, but still, she takes her down. All in all, Harley Quinn has become such a popular and prevalent villain that her street level status has even been contested a few times. My guess is she will soon be given a huge power adjustment for the better and find her way to becoming a higher level villain than even the Joker himself. At number 8 we have the classic Green Goblin. This villain has always been one of Spider-Man's biggest nemesis, but still has always kept his integrity as a grassroots street level villain. Although Norman Osborn has become involved in plenty of bigger plots and missions that concern greater causes than street violence, his persona in Goblin mode is still very much a street level threat. And with his arsenal of goblin bombs and sleeping gas, he often packs a pretty significant punch at every encounter. But the worst of the Green Goblin's plots typically aim to inflict psychological torture on Peter Parker, which shows Osborn's resourcefulness, because street level villains only have so much to work with. In fact, I'd argue that Green Goblin is one of the most psychologically damaging villains on this whole list, often targeting family members and deep traumas that force Spider-Man and other targets of his into extremely uncomfortable positions and tough decisions. At number 7 is Red Hood. After the events of Death in the Family, Red Hood sees his origin story come to a brutal fruition as he is forced to rebuild himself. And as he rebuilds, he solidifies a name for himself as one of the most powerful street level villains out there. He travels the world, becoming adept in all the martial art forms like Aikido, ninjutsu, Krav Maga, and even capoeira, among others. His hand-to-hand combat skills lead him to defeating Ra's al Ghul in a fistfight at one point, which is a pretty impressive feat considering the villain is typically a tough match for even Batman himself. Another impressive angle for Red Hood is that he knows how heroes move and act, since he used to be one himself, and this allows him to be one step ahead of them at all times. All while keeping street level status, he even goes back to heroism in his own twisted way when he steals the Batman mantle during Bruce Wayne's presumed death. But ultimately his villainy seems to prevail at times, like when he kills over 80 men in a poisoning plot while escaping Arkham Asylum. His devilish, revenge-driven plots are always pushing the envelope, and his mysterious persona keeps him hidden in the shadows as he runs the Gotham Underground as a solo act. At number 6 is Kraven the Hunter. As one of Spider-Man's oldest and most enduring villains, Kraven has had plenty of time to build up his resume as one of the most impressive street-level villains in comic book history. And I'd argue that Kraven is one of the most authentically street-level villains on the list, considering he devotes his life to tracking down and hunting superheroes with little more than some traps and handheld weaponry. But his biggest move of all is when he actually catches and kills Spider-Man during the events of Kraven's last hunt. Although the death only lasts so long, it does show that Kraven is actually capable of following following through with even the most ambitious hunts on his list. And what's more, his manipulation abilities also shine through when he successfully dupes the masses into believing that he is the web slinger himself for a time, dashing Spider-Man's reputation and making his comeback that much more difficult. At number 5 is Bane. One of the toughest upbringings on this list, the New 52 Bane spends his childhood in prison, living out his own father's sentence in a setting that teaches him how to fight to stay alive. But beyond his original motivations, Bane has one of the highest strength levels on this whole list. Known to be able to lift 15 tons, Bane doesn't hesitate to make use of his industrial surroundings while taking on his opposition, often using concrete slabs and boulders as weapons and projectiles in battle. What's more though, Bane is often caught in the grips of a venom addiction, which empowers him even more when he's under the influence. This gives him that extra power boost that brings his strength to another tier that is often unattainable by most villainous standards, especially among fellow street level bad guys, because with Bane, it's not uncommon to see him crashing through a stone wall or shattering concrete floors or one-shotting other villains like Poison Ivy and Man-Bat in his fits of rage. At number 4 is Dr. Octopus. Still considered a street-level bad guy, Doc Ock seems to be one of the most inventive and high-powered villains in that category. With his supercharged intellect, he is known to be on par with Tony Stark and even Reed Richards, and often applies his smarts to developing new technologies to help him succeed as a villain. Known as the founder of the Sinister Six, he's also got ties to the rest of the supervillain community and clearly has the ability to mobilize his villainous counterparts as though it's a second nature to him. But above all, his greatest feat that sort of puts the definition of street level into question is the time when he swaps Peter Parker's mind with his own while he's facing a terminal illness. This leads Doc Ock into a life of heroism as Spider-Man and ultimately kills the one and only Peter Parker in the process. That moment is almost on par with the time he held the whole world hostage as one of the most impressive feats that any street level villain has ever accomplished. Okay, at number 3 we have Jean-Paul Valley. Typically going by the name of Azrael, Jean-Paul Valley has a pretty powerful track record and seems to almost supersede the title of street level villain, but I would argue that he still is in that category and simply exists to show just how powerful a street level villain could get. Having been given a massive genetic enhancement at birth, Jean-Paul already has a one-up on most of the other entries on this list, with a superhuman set of abilities like enhanced healing, senses, durability, speed, and of course, strength. But above all, he's got a reputation as one of the most intelligent villains with an advanced hand-to-hand combat and swordsmanship stat to boot, using his flaming sword as a weapon of choice in close combat and his projectile blades at distance. He's also got a win out as one of the coolest looking street level villains too, if you ask me. At number 2 is Kingpin. As one of the most well-connected villains on the list, Kingpin uses the streets to his advantage more than maybe any other villain on this list. Being a big brute with powerful strength and durability stats, he's pretty good on his own, but his real power comes from his social power and influence. He's got the ability to take down his enemies with a systematic approach the same way that a mob boss would in the real world. Except in this case, his cronies are often other superpowered beings who are willing to carry out his evil deeds for him. And if we're not counting social power as part of a villain's power set on a list about power, then we're not truly valuing every angle of the art of villainy, if you will. And although someone like Dr. Doom might have the monopoly on the cosmic level villain community, this is, after all, a list about the street level bad guys and how they make use of the limited resources they have access to on the streets of New York or Gotham. And there's just no arguing that Kingpin just simply has the streets under his thumb. Okay, at number 1 is the one and only, the man himself, Joker. I feel like I really shouldn't have to justify this entry because we all know that the Joker is one of the best villains, not just on the streets of Gotham, but of all time. And it's primarily due to this resourcefulness I mentioned in the previous entry that being a street level villain demands. The Joker is well aware that he has always needed to make more of an impact than Batman's superpowered villains, but without the superpowers. And the way that he typically does this is by resorting to psychological torment against his enemies, usually by bringing their family members and friends into the fold or by appealing to their greatest insecurities. And all in the name of a laugh, which just adds that extra level of intimidation to the whole effort. It's the Joker who paralyzes Commissioner Jim Gordon's daughter and takes all morale away from the good guys at that crucial moment. It's the Joker who beats Batman's second Robin, Jason Todd, to death, leaving Batman to find a new sidekick. And it's the Joker who tricks Superman into dropping a bomb on Metropolis and killing the love of his life, Lois Lane. He's never acting alone, but instead of enlisting other villains to help in his plots, he's often enlisting the heroes themselves, turning their own psyches on them, if not making their whole lives crumble around them before the battle can even start. There's no need to expound anymore because I can just go on, but when I knew I would be writing this list, there was no question that the Joker was gonna be in the #1 spot. Okay, that's the list for today. Thanks for watching. Please comment below if I've left anyone out. As always, I'll do my absolute best to respond to you. I've been your host, Ben Ball, and this has been Top 10 Nerd. You know the rest. Take it easy.